Hello there. Today I want to talk about a phenomenon that is very much of our times. From the title, I think you can probably guess more or less what I'm going to be talking about. But as someone that was born in 1970, I can see a tremendous change in life, in the lifestyles of people today, which for people who were born perhaps sort of around the millennium or after that, that change is definitely not so apparent. Um, Depending also on what country you live in, you know, you might, if you're living in some kind of rural part of Cambodia, you may not have experienced the internet or iPhones or any of this of digital life at all. So your life might still be the same, but for a lot of people in Western countries, certainly people born from 1990 onwards, there's certainly been quite a dramatic change with, the ubiquitous mobile phone and the rise of the internet, which has certainly transformed the way that we live today. So, for me, as someone who was born before all that, when computers were still relatively massive at that time, and so from the age of about 10, they became small, like the size of, a small briefcase, or in some cases, like the Sinclair Spectrum and the ZX81, about the size of a piece of paper, of writing paper or typing paper. So, the microprocessor that totally transformed the ability to create sort of user-friendly and cheap products that incorporated computers of some kind. And virtually everything you buy now that's mechanical or electronic or electrical has got microprocessors in. So for me, it's somewhat strange because I feel like I've lived two lives and I'm essentially living two lives at the same time. So up to the point when I started to use the internet on a regular basis, and learning myself how to create websites, etc. My life was very much offline. I didn't even watch that much telly. I did spend a lot of my time reading books and music, going to the cinema, going to the theatre, availing of things going on in big cities, going out to nightclubs, dancing and such like, and socializing, going to pubs, etc. Occasionally going out to a restaurant, and that was very much changed. Partly because I've got older, because I was a student in London and working in there for a total of 10 years. So I think I kind of availed of what London has to offer fairly well. I didn't just stay home all the time watching television. But I suppose it's the mid-90s really where you start to see a shift and the beginnings of a sort of digital life. I was quite resistant to getting a mobile phone, and I think I got one in, I think it was 1999 or 2000. I got just a very basic Motorola phone at that time. And for quite a long time, I resisted buying a smartphone. I remember when the iPhone came out and, the Blackberries before that, etc. And I just had no real interest. Although a lot of people I knew were really getting into all this. I remember my friends getting Facebook, and I was like, oh, no, I don't need that. So very gradually over time, things sort of shifted. And then you've got this whole sort of online life you have parallel to the sort of actual real world life. But as time has passed, that has shifted more and more. And I found from having worked in graphic design and publishing a lot, I spend a lot of time on computers because of my work. Not so much these days, but certainly back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And you start to see the phone becoming more and more a part of people's lives. And gradually, not only are people, having conversations, they've started, that in itself changed. It was a thing where you'd be on a train or in a restaurant and you'd hear people talk, or you see them sending text messages, clacking away quite often, because often the buttons made a noise when you typed, which would annoy people, and that's changed very much. So quite often these days you see people using their phone, but they're not actually talking to anyone. They're not either sending a text message to their friends or having a real phone conversation. A lot of them, it's people are scrolling. They're not necessarily communicating with anybody, and it used to be the case that you might take a photograph and send it to someone you knew, but nowadays you can just take a photo and post it on one of these apps, and you don't necessarily have to send it to any one particular person. By using these apps, you can send it to everyone you know if they're interested to look. So it's a different extra layer of depersonalization there, where you're not actually in direct communication. So I feel that I kind of ended up having two lives, because obviously I create content, I write books, which I type on the computer. I design some books as well, again with the computer, and I do a quarterly magazine, which I produce myself. Well, I don't do the printing, that's printed somewhere else in Ireland, but I do all the design and production work on it. So I'm spending a lot of time there, but I'm not actually surfing the internet while I'm doing that, generally speaking. I might put on some music in the background, or possibly even put on a podcast on YouTube or something. But things have certainly moved an awful lot, like the way people go about watching things. I used to go to the cinema a lot more than I do now, or you sit down and watch a film on the television, or you put a video on, or a DVD, or a Blu-ray. I've actually got a Blu-ray player still, so I still do things like that. I sit and put on a film and watch the whole film. Or I'll sit and put a CD on in my car, or I'll put it on the stereo and just sit and listen to a whole album. Whereas listening trends have changed so much, where people just listen to playlists, and quite often people aren't even choosing what they're listening to. It's being selected for them by an algorithm, which is very different from, say, choosing to sit and listen to the whole of Dark Side of the Moon as a piece of music that was created with, and the way it was put together, in sitting and listening to that entire album was what the band had in mind. That you wouldn't just cherry pick tracks and listen to them. They wanted it to be a listening experience. And so many things were like that and aren't anymore. So although I'm kind of got one foot in this whole digital world of making content, looking at other people's content and scrolling and whatever, I also very much live in the real world of physicality. As I said, I'll sit and watch a DVD. I'll sit and listen to music. I'll actually read a real physical book when I'm indoors. Sometimes I might play my guitar. But I also do a lot of things outside. Like every day I have to, I feed the cats, and I'll go out and feed the birds. And I also have chickens, and I'll go and feed them and you know, they have to be cleaned out every so often, etc., I'll go and mooch around the garden, and I grow a lot of food. So, although, you know, I am quite immersed in the digital world, I also have at least one foot in the real physical world. And the contrast of how these two things make you feel, or how they make me feel, rather, I should say, is quite striking, I think. And that's really what's brought me to make this video. So, I mean, a lot of what I'm doing then is, you know, might be some repetition, like going and cleaning the chickens out, which I do once a week. You know, it's repetitive, but you know, I've chosen to do this. You know, that's a very much a conscious decision that I would go and buy the materials to make them a chicken run, and I bought I bought a children's playhouse for them to live in, which worked out much easier and cheaper and quicker than building them a house. So it looks kind of ridiculous. You know, it's a multicolored plastic house that they live in, but they seem quite happy there, and it's much easier to clean than, you know, than a wooden house. So that was all very deliberate, and I thought about it. It wasn't something that was suggested by an algorithm or something that was just thrown up in front of me and I just passively absorbed it. The same with all like DIY projects I do, whatever. And the garden as well. It's very much conscious and decisions that I am making about what I want to do with my time. I'm not being directed by external forces in what I'm doing. But I've noticed that with a lot of digital life, streaming platforms, for instance, Netflix or Prime or Apple and all these other ones, okay, you can go and do a search for something specific, but generally what happens is you're presented a bunch of options. It's got various different sort of categories, like this is for you, this is recommended, you know, interesting music videos, etc., etc. But it has made a selection of what it thinks you like based on its algorithm, based on what it thinks that you want or are likely to want to watch. And of course, those are very limited. You're going to get maybe, I don't know, depending on the platform, 10 to 20 options shown in each section. So, I mean, obviously something like Netflix has thousands and thousands of films and series, but you're not going to be offered all of those at once. So there's you know, you do of course have a choice, but your choices are being narrowed down by the algorithm and what it wants to present to you with all these platforms. And the same is also true of things like YouTube, which I use quite a lot to upload videos, but I also watch some. And I've noticed recently that a lot of the content is very, very dark on YouTube, what's being offered to me, and quite miserable and depressing and sort of sensationalist. And the same is true also of some of the streaming services. You know, even when you scroll down to the comedy section, sometimes there's like horror films in there with the comedy. And, you know, not necessarily comedy horrors. I mean, I've watched a lot of horror films in the past, but not so much lately in the last few years. So I'm familiar with a lot of horror films from the last 40 years, really, I suppose. And then I notice these things when an inappropriate film that is, like, strictly speaking, a horror pops up in the comedies. And there's lots of this kind of stuff going on with rather sort of bleak and dark content appearing in places where probably it shouldn't do. And that's certainly true of Netflix, and I think of some of the other platforms as well. And it all just seems rather unnecessary and a little bit strange to me that this trend is happening. Really, what you've got is sort of multiple different sort of avenues by which you can be exposed to this stuff. Obviously, the computer, which I use a lot more than the phone, because I don't like the tiny little phones. I've got big hands, so I find the phone really difficult at times. So, I mean, I've got YouTube and Facebook, and I've got various apps that I use. But I mean, you think about computers, a lot of people would also use them for video games, which I gave up playing a long time ago. I used to be very addicted to computer games. In fact, I used to play a game called World of Warcraft, and I got so addicted to it, I started dreaming about it. And at that point, I thought, right, I've got to get rid of this. So I deleted it off my computer, and I took my CDs, because it was still CDs back then, and I took the package down to the charity shop after I deleted all the program. And that was it. I've never really played video games since, because it's so addictive. It's so incredibly addictive. And then, of course, you've now got much bigger problem. Apart from that, is pornography, which seems to be absolutely everywhere. Huge percentage of the internet, and online gambling. So when you think about it, the percentage of activities that people do with their computers that are actually bad for them, which are really quite dark, it is a lot. It's probably well over 50%. If you average it out across the whole of society. I haven't got exact figures there, but I do know that an absolutely enormous amount of traffic across the internet is either related to any one of those three very addictive areas of activity, which I find quite disturbing, to be honest. Well, then, there's of course the similar problems with the phone. You've got TikTok, you've got Instagram, you've got all of the other apps like YouTube as well, of course. And then so various apps you can download that are specific to the phone. And by their own admission, a lot of these people who've created these apps, like for instance Meta, their Facebook app, and many of the designers have admitted that it was deliberately designed to be addictive, that you would continue to want to scroll and try to keep you online for as long as possible. The algorithm is not designed to actually satisfy you. It's designed to want you to keep looking and watching more. It's a bit like being addicted to cigarettes in a way. Like cigarettes are horrible, they make you feel awful, but if you're addicted to them, you just still have to have more, even though you know they're not great and you don't even probably enjoy it. Your compulsion is so insistent that you're just going to have more cigarettes, unless you actually manage to give up. And I think a lot of the internet experience now is very like that. It's quite often quite negative, quite dark, not really very uplifting or satisfying, but it's so compulsive, so addictive that people are just still having to pick up their phone and scroll. And it's time consuming. It eats your time. I don't know if you've ever experienced it yourself, but I certainly have felt like I've gone onto the computer to check my email. I'd have a quick look on Facebook, and before you know it, 2 hours have gone by just like that, disappeared. And it can be an awful, awful waste of time. And there are things, I use the computer for a lot of research, for looking up things of, there might be some random thing I see on a program, and I think to myself, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to go and look up information about X, Y, and Z. And I will go and I'll sometimes use Wikipedia, although I don't think that's particularly reliable. But I'll go and look up certain bits of information. And it is amazing to me that you've got a computer that's got such power now, and even a phone, a tiny computer in your pocket, that you can find out pretty much anything you want to know that's been recorded somewhere. You'll find it. You'll find it via the internet, and you can you can really upgrade your knowledge on pretty much any subject at all by just using search engines, which is amazing. But what tends to happen to a large extent is people are very passive rather than active in the way that they use the internet. Instead of, like I'm doing, I'm very much going and searching for things that I've decided I want to go and find out about. A lot of people just passively follow what the algorithm suggests. The algorithm's choosing what it's going to show to you, and you pick from that limited selection. It's a bit like breakfast cereals. These big box breakfast cereals, they're pretty much all the same. So if that's all you're presented is sort of like the Rice Krispies type stuff, all those different options in those huge boxes, where you could actually go off and have porridge or bacon and eggs or kippers or some fruit. You're not offered those kind of options. You just get a very limited selection. So I think that's very much steering people down a certain direction, and discouraging people from thinking for themselves and making selections for themselves. It's the easier option is just to accept what the algorithm has offered you and not really put any effort into looking for something specific. So another thing that I've noticed, obviously, that's become big in recent years is voice activation. So you have that with searches on your phone or even on a computer if you've got a microphone. And there's the likes of Alexa and these other sort of boxes that were, I suppose, initially designed to play music, but now they have sort of been connected to search engines. So that means you can, while you're not even near a computer or on your phone, while you're, say, cooking, or even if you're in the shower or something, you can then ask these devices to do things for you, like, play some music, or, find out what time the next train to somewhere leaves, etc., etc. So that's bringing all of that further out of the digital devices into your actual real physical space. So you don't actually have to be connected at all, in the form of being sat in the computer or at the computer or having the phone there in your hand. That's not even necessary now. And the same is also true with these smart glasses, something that's sort of an evolution of, I suppose, the virtual reality headset, which isn't popular, but what you're getting there is called enhanced reality rather than virtual reality, where things can be projected into your glasses, and also you can use them for filming and sort of a first-person point of view, that if you want to send stuff to your apps like Instagram or whatever, that it's actually the camera on the glasses have lined up with your eyesight. So whatever you're looking at is what the app will also see. So it's taking things further and further into the actual real physical world, away from the digital environment. And then, of course, you now have one step further again, which is AI. And this seems to be being very much embraced by a lot of people, where it's one step further from having a search engine or having the Alexa type devices, and that you can not just ask it to find you some music or look up train times or whatever. You can ask AI to do all kinds of mad things, and you can use it for creativity too. I mean, really, people may think that they're being creative by asking AI to do something, like make a video of a pop star, on a skateboard dancing, with a bear or something, and it'll go off and do that. And they think, well, isn't that great? But really, it's the AI that's doing all of this, really. So the actual creative process that's required, say, to sort of make a painting or a video of such a thing is being completely removed from the human being. You just have to ask it, and it will go off and do it for you. But I don't really like AI, and I have pretty much refused to use it. I have used it a couple of times, but mostly, on the two most recent occasions I've used it. I think this is the three times in total. The first time was to make some pictures, and the last two times have been to ask it questions about itself and what it's actually doing and how it operates and what its purposes are. I'm not really interested in using AI, but I am interested in what AI's raison d'etre is and what its future development is going to be, even though I don't want to use it myself. So I asked the AI about whether it could profile people who don't use AI. So suppose you just have a limited number of apps on your phone and on your computer, and you don't ever actually use AI at all. So the answer actually surprisingly was yes. AI can profile people like that who have never used AI, who never intend to use AI in the future. And based on various different sources, the use of different apps, and collecting data from third parties about people's preferences, that may be linked with advertising, it could be linked with handy apps for shopping, also all the social media, etc., etc. Wherever the stuff is stored across the internet, if the AI is able to get access to it, it can then build a profile about you, even if you don't have and have never used AI. So it could then use that data to target you with advertising. It can use that to change the algorithms in certain programs and apps to further sort of cater to what it perceives are your needs. And more of these platforms and apps are now engaging with AI, so that the algorithms that decide what you're going to be presented with aren't just relying on the algorithm itself. The data that's being collected from AI is feeding into that. So, and of course, if you actually do use AI and have an AI account, it will use those interactions that you have with it. It will remember everything that's happened, everything you've ever said to it, and everything that it said to you, and it will factor all of that into your future interactions. So, I was quite shocked by that. So it could be the case that somebody that has very, very limited access to the internet, doesn't use all these apps, they will end up with being targeted and being shown various content based on what AI has collected about them, even though their interaction with AI is zero, which I thought that was very worrying. I don't like the thought of that at all. And what this all points to is sort of losing control of our lives. where the digital world is very much dictating what we do, and it's creeping more and more into the physical world around us. So even when you're outside, you could have, like, say, an Alexa connected that's listening to everything you're saying. You could have a pair of these smart glasses which pick up audio as well as video. And your phone can listen to you and what you have to say all of the time. And every time you use a program like Siri or something similar, or AI, one of the AI apps, it's remembering everything and adding and adding and adding to your profile. And so that separation between the physical world, I remember where you just had a computer that was just connected to the internet sometimes, and you did things with it. And then the rest of your life, which was outside, which, might involve, going to the shops, roller skating, going to see a band, watching a movie in an actual theatre, whatever, going to the pub, socializing with your friends. All that stuff was completely separate from that world of the computer. But now the two are more and more being merged. And also what you're being presented with while you're living your life in terms of options is being more and more controlled by the digital algorithms, and more and more now by AI. And I think this is a very worrying trend. It's not one I'm very happy about. And I'm fortunate in that I have very much a separate life that's away from the computer. I use the privacy options that are available to me as much as possible, to restrict the amount of tracking that any of these programs can pick up. But even so, I'm pretty certain that AI has somewhere got a profile about my life and is now deciding what kind of things it wants me to see. When I put on Netflix and try and pick a movie, I'm sure the results of AI's huge resources is playing into that. And the same with many other things that exist in the digital world that I might be interested in. So I think we're actually beginning to lose a lot of our autonomy, and a lot of the content that's being put forward is actually very nasty, very dark, very negative. Even if you're like a positive person that's very interested in, say, spirituality or in pop music, for example, I would sort of maybe put in a search about some particular artist like Prince or David Bowie, or say a singer like Beth Orton or someone like that, and the search engine, or the search algorithm rather, will come up with things like 10 horrible facts about Prince, or how David Bowie was an awful person and treated everyone like rubbish, or so and so was involved in horrible dark rituals in the music industry. And why some of these things may actually be true. You didn't ask to be presented with this stuff. It's putting these things up as options a lot of the time, which are then they're not very positive. They may be clickbaity, and they may be sort of presented in a way that sort of appeals to sort of addictive tendency within people. Going back to this thing I was saying earlier about the cigarette, where you don't really want this content, but it's somehow seductive, somehow becomes quite compulsive and addictive. Like having to have a cigarette because you're hopelessly addicted to nicotine. So I'm really making a conscious effort now to be a lot more discerning about what I do with my time, because it just eats up your time. All this digital world, it eats your day, it eats your time away, time that you could be better spending things like reading a book, being outside in the sun and just being in nature, or ringing up a friend you haven't spoken to for ages and actually having a real conversation with a real person. All those kind of things can just be negated and almost deleted from your life, but because the algorithm just keeps you suckered in and is presenting more and more and more and more stuff. It's quite possible to spend your entire day from when you wake up just hooked to a phone, to a computer, to an Alexa device or whatever, all these kind of things all through your day, and it just degrades your real interactions with real human beings because your full attention is not there. So I think you have to be really making an effort to be fully present with other people and to make decisions that are very much based in the real world, that cut out this whole digital life, because it is insidious. And if you don't make an effort, you'll find that, content watching just creeps up. You're not even noticing it, that you're very slowly becoming desensitized and addicted to all this digital content. And then you find you've no time. You've not managed to read a book or read a magazine or go out and play sport, or you haven't arranged to see your friends, because this compulsive online life is just eating your time away. So, I'm lucky in that I remember the world before the internet very well. I suppose up to the age of mid-20s to late 20s, that had a very small effect on my life, or it wasn't even there. So it's a lot easier for me to resist. But I think for young people who've grown up with all this from the very beginning, what chance do they really have? They have to really make a conscious decision to fight this stuff. And their resistance is, I think, a lot lower than people of my own generation. So, food for thought there. Maybe some people don't see this as a problem. They think all this AI and more apps and omnipresent digital life is brilliant and beneficial. I don't think so myself. But I'd be interested to hear what you think about this subject and where the future is taking us. And is it going in a positive direction, or is this getting worse and worse? So if you like what I had to say, please leave a comment and let me know what you think. And please hit the like button and consider subscribing as well. I like to do these long format videos, and the more people support me, I'll be able to carry on doing more of these. So thank you for watching, and I'll be back with another one fairly soon, hopefully. That's it for now. Bye bye.